All right, hello everyone. My name is Pino Suleiman. I'm a product manager on the Amazon S3 team, and I'm joined today by my colleague Sneha Iyengar, who is a senior software development engineer on the Amazon S3 team. Just before we start, I really hope that you have a good reInvent experience so far, and I want to share something a bit personal. So reInvent is a celebration for me, not only because of all of the exciting launches that we have, but also because it is my birthday week, so I'm actually celebrating on Friday. So happy to be here and share with you about the great work that our team is doing, and in particular talk about how to gain insights into your storage at scale with S3 Storage Lens. So by show of hands, how many people in this room are familiar with Storage Lens or have used it before? OK, that's about, I would say, 60% of the room. Among those of you who are using it, how many are using it for cost optimization insights? OK, and what about data protection? OK, even less. And performance? Anybody is using Lens to monitor performance? OK, we have great job. And cool, so then I hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll learn a bit more how you can use Storage Lens to learn to do more about cost optimization and data protection, and even so for performance. So let's take a quick look at our agenda today. We're going to start by covering the Amazon S3 Insights portfolio. So these are the available tools that we have in S3 that make it easier for you to gain visibility and understanding of your storage usage. Then we're going to focus on S3 Storage Lens. We're going to do a product recap, highlighting some of its key functionalities. Next, we're getting to the exciting part of this session. We're going to cover our latest announcement, introducing new metrics and use cases in Storage Lens. These new metrics enable a number of new use cases, so we're going to dive deep on some of them and showcase some practical examples. And finally, we'll close out the presentation with key takeaways from this session. So let's start with the Amazon S3 Insights portfolio, but before we go there, let's first understand why it's important to gain visibility into your storage. So to achieve operational excellence, meet business objectives, or optimize for cost, data protection, or performance, you need to understand how your systems are operating. And that's why there are multiple solutions that enable you to collect and analyze data from your applications so you can better understand their internal states and work toward these optimizations. Shifting back to S3, over the last decades, we've seen our customers experiencing a major growth in their storage usage, going from a handful of S3 buckets to hundreds or even thousands of buckets across multiple accounts and regions. These customers told us that it has become increasingly difficult for them to gain visibility into their storage in order to optimize their costs or to improve their security posture. And that is the reason why in S3, we invest in building solutions that can make it easier for you to understand your storage. Some of the common questions these customers were asking are, what are my largest buckets? Are all my objects encrypted? How is my data distributed across storage classes, accounts, and regions? How fast is my S3 data growing? And what are my fastest growing buckets? We can answer all of these questions with the available tools that we have in S3. So let's take a closer look at them. So starting with Storage Lens, which is an analytics service that provides an organization-wide visibility with activity and usage metrics. We see Storage Lens as the recommended first step in gaining visibility into your storage, just because it is so easy to get started with, because it has an automated, pre-configured dashboard at the account level. Some of the other tools that we have that I'd like to call out: S3 Inventory is a tool that helps you to generate a list of your objects within a bucket or a prefix, along with their corresponding metadata field. So you really can get insights into object level. Some of the metadata fields that are included in inventory are object size, storage class, encryption status, and more. Next, S3 Storage Class Analysis is a tool that generates recommendations for the most cost-efficient storage class based on your access patterns. S3 Server Access logs to log detailed requests at the bucket or object level for investigation and analysis or troubleshooting. And Amazon CloudWatch metrics for S3 enables you to monitor request metrics, storage metrics, and replication metrics within CloudWatch. This is a useful side-by-side comparison looking at the granularity level, updating frequency, and price for each one of these insights tools. So starting by looking at the granularity level and at storage lens, it provides you the higher granularity level from the organization level, and you can go down to the account, bucket, and even prefix level. Storage lens metrics are updated daily, and they come at a price of 20 cents per million objects monitored per month. Storage class analysis can be configured at the bucket or prefix level. You can also filter the recommendations based on object tags. The recommendations are updated daily, and they come at a price of 10 cents per million objects monitored per month. Amazon CloudWatch metrics for S3 can be configured at the bucket prefix level or by object tags. The updating frequency varies between 1 minute and 1 day. It depends on the metric you monitor. So for example, request metrics are updated by the minute, but daily storage metrics are updated daily. S3 inventory and server access logs have granularity by the object and the request levels, with S3 inventory updating daily or weekly, depends on the configuration, and comes at a quarter of a cent per million objects. And server access logs comes at no charge once you enable it. Now, after we cover the S3 Insights tools, let's take a closer look at Storage Lens. And I want to start by sharing with you a very interesting stat that we recently uncovered. So historically, we've been hearing from customers that are using Lens that they're yielding cost optimization by using the service. But so far, we only had anecdotal evidence to support this impact. Recently, we completed a study covering over 2,000 customers, and now we have more concrete evidence to support the impact of using Storage Lens. This study was run by internal AWS data scientists that looked at usage and spend for customers before and after enabling Storage Lens. And we found that on average, these customers saw more than 6x return on investment when using Storage Lens. That means that whatever amount you spend on Storage Lens, you get it back 6x or more in the form of cost savings. How did we come to build Storage Lens? So like many other AWS products, we worked backward from our customers. And we're hearing customers providing us feedback on 3 main areas. First, they wanted an easy way to get visibility into their storage. Second, they wanted the ability to analyze data at different granularity levels. And third, they wanted the ability to get meaningful insights that allow them to take actions. We've also seen customers considering these needs to be so critical that they build their own homegrown analytics solutions. They're collecting raw data from S3 using S3 inventory, server access logs, and then they would run analytic solutions on this data using Amazon Athena, for example, to generate insights. And then they would visualize these insights in tools such as QuickSight. We realized that not all of our customers have the resources or are willing to commit the resources to build such solution. So that's why in S3 we decided to solve this problem for all of our customers. So at re:Invent 2020, we launched S3 Storage Lens, a storage analytics service that provides organization-wide visibility into storage usage and activity to improve cost efficiency and data protection. And I'd like to call out some of its key functionalities. First, it has an interactive dashboard experience that it's built into the S3 console and auto-configured at the account level. Second, these dashboards provide a centralized, organization-wide view of storage across all of your accounts and buckets. Third, you can also use the dashboards to drill down from top-level summary view at the organization level down to the account, bucket, region, and even prefix level. You can also access Storage Lens metrics through multiple ways, including the console experience, the metrics export feature, and by publishing the metrics into CloudWatch. And lastly, storage lens provides you a set of 29 granular metrics that are pre-aggregated at each one of these levels. So let me walk you through these capabilities one by one, starting with the storage lens dashboard experience. So this is, customers are telling us that they really like the dashboard experience, and that is mainly because it is so easy to get started with. The dashboard is pre-configured for every customer at the account level at no cost, showing you free metrics for the last 14 days. That means that if you haven't started using Lens yet, all you have to do is log into your S3 console and just activate your account level dashboard. There is no work required to set it up. Another reason customers really like the dashboard experience is because it's highly interactive. The dashboard allows you to easily shift dates to explore historical dates or historical range of dates. You can apply filters on different granularity level, and you can toggle between the different metrics to focus on your area of interest. For example, cost optimization versus data protection. All of this make it really easy to get started and use the storage lens dashboard. So just to show you some examples, let's say that you want to understand how your total storage or object count is trending over the last 30 days. So you can use the out-of-the-box trend analysis and set up the date range for your last 30 days. And here you can see two trend lines. The red trend lines represent object count. The blue trend line represents your total storage, and you can clearly see a steady growth rates over your last 30 days. I can also see a very strong correlation between my total objects and my total bytes and my object count, so I can also infer that my bytes are uniformly distributed across my objects. With this view, it's also very easy to identify any anomalies, seasonalities, or spikes in my object count or total storage and investigate or plan accordingly. Another example I really like in Storage Lens is using the bubble analysis. So the bubble analysis enables me to plot any of my buckets on multiple dimensions using any three metrics to represent the x-axis, the y-axis, and the bubble size. In this example, I want to see how my buckets, I want to get better understanding of how object size and object count are distributed across my buckets. So I set up my average object size for the x-axis, my object count for the y-axis, and total storage as size dimension. And this is the view I get. Looking at it, I can see that most of my buckets fall at the bottom part of the screen and are low on object count and total bytes. At the center, I can identify one large bucket with more than 500,000 objects. And that is a bucket I would like to focus on and keep monitoring for cost optimization and data protection. And I can also identify an interesting bucket at the top left part of the screen that is very low on the average object size, but very high on object count. When I read the bucket name, that actually makes sense because that is a CloudTrail logs bucket. So probably many logs that are like small objects, but many of them. Moving on to the second capability is the organization-wide visibility. So Storage Lens, by default, Storage Lens dashboard are configured at the account level, but it's very easy to configure Storage Lens at the organization view using the AWS organization integration that we have. When you enable that, Storage Lens automatically collect and aggregate metrics across all your accounts and buckets in the organization and easily and show them easily in your dashboard. Let's take a look on a quick example for the organization-wide view. So this is the out-of-the-box summary view of Lens. You can see multiple metrics about like summary, cost optimization, data protection, and how they're trending over the last 30 days. And I want to call out your attention to the top line summary view, where you can see metrics that are aggregated automatically at the organization level. So I can clearly see that I have about 181 petabytes across the organization with 61 billion objects. My average object size is 3.2 megabytes, and I have 40 active buckets across 4 accounts. The next capability I'd like to call out is using the drill down dimensions in storage lens. And just as I showed you in the previous example, it's very easy to get started with a high-level summary at the organization view and then drill down to lower levels such as account or even region, storage class, buckets, and even prefix. So let's see how can we use these drill down dimensions to understand how our data is distributed across storage classes and regions. So the blue bar represent my total storage, and the red bars represent my object count. And on the right-hand side, I can see the distribution across regions. I can see that my data is distributed across 2 regions, US East North Virginia and US East Ohio, with the majority of my data concentrated in North Virginia. Looking at the left-hand side, I can see my storage distribution across storage classes. And here I can see something very interesting. I can see that 100% of my data is concentrated in S3 standard. That is the first call out that I make anytime I work with customers about cost optimization. This pattern is a strong indicator that as a customer, you have an opportunity to optimize your cost by using some of the other more efficient storage classes. For example, intelligent tiering or Glacier instant retrieval in cases where you have rarely accessed data but require a millisecond retrieval time. Let's talk about how you can access storage lens data. So most of our customers appreciate the integrated console experience that it's built into the S3 console. It's an easy way just to get started because there is no work required to set it up, and you can easily browse through the multiple metrics in the console. However, we also have many customers who prefer just to access the metrics data. Their motivation for it is because they want to join this data with some other internal data sources or create their own analytic solutions. For this type of customer, it's going to be easiest to use the metrics export, where we can just write all the metrics into a report in a format of a CSV or a Parquet file and write them directly into any buckets within your account on a daily basis. And lastly, we also have many customers who prefer to see their storage lens metrics along with other monitoring metrics from any other AWS services. For this type of customers, the CloudWatch publishing would be the best option. So just as a recap, we announced the Amazon Cloud Publishing last year at reInvent, and we're already seeing many customers using this capability for multiple use cases. When enabling this option, Storage Lens will send the all 29 usage and activity metrics to CloudWatch on a daily basis. This makes it possible for our customers also to use CloudWatch native features for multiple use cases that I'd like to call out a few of them. For example, you can now use CloudWatch dashboards to create a cross-service and unified experience of your entire AWS metrics. The idea here is that instead of using Storage Lens dashboard as a standalone dashboard, you simply integrate Storage Lens metrics into any of your existing CloudWatch dashboards to generate a unified view of all of your services at AWS. A second advantage of using the centralized CloudWatch dashboards is that it has a more flexible permission models. We heard from our customers that they want to share their lens metrics with users that are not IAM users or sometimes even like external to AWS, and that's not possible with Lens. However, when you use the CloudWatch dashboards, you can share this dashboard with customers that are not IAM users by specifying an email address or even making a dashboard completely public so anybody can access it. A second use case for using the CloudWatch API, the CloudWatch publishing feature, is that you can leverage the built-in alarm and trigger actions. This feature enables you to create any alarm on any Storage Lens metric and to specify a threshold about when to alarm. You can also use the anomaly detection feature of CloudWatch, which is kind of a smarter version of the basic alarms. With the anomaly detection feature, you let CloudWatch to analyze the historical metric patterns and to come up with a baseline. And anytime the metric falls outside of this baseline, you get an alarm. So just a common example that we're seeing a lot of our customers using for the anomaly detection with storage lens is to create anomaly detection on 4xx errors. 4xx errors happen when a bucket doesn't exist anymore or has restricted access or rights. So by setting an anomaly detection alarm on 4xx errors, you can identify any misconfigurations in your access policies or even any malicious activity of non-authorized users trying to access your buckets. Getting to our fifth and last capabilities is the granular metrics within storage lens. So lens provide you a set of 29 usage and activity metrics that are grouped into 4 main categories. First category is the summary metrics for gathering top-level insights. So for example, you can see total storage, object count, and average object size, growth rates, and more. We also have cost efficiency metrics to identify cost-saving opportunities, for example, cleaning incomplete MPUs or long delete markers. Data protection metrics helps you to identify opportunities to follow S3 best practices for data protection, for example, enabling encryption or replication. And lastly, activity metrics to identify your hottest buckets or abandoned workloads. Yeah, I'm going to leave this slide up for a few more seconds just because I see some folks taking photos. We'll take questions after the session. So while our customers really like the breadth of the metrics at Storage Lens and the use case that it helped them to address, they've been constantly asking us to support more metrics and more use cases. And I'm very happy to cover the latest announcement that we had with Storage Lens, introducing new metrics and new use cases for this tool. For a few weeks ago, we more than doubled the existing Lens metrics, adding 34 new metrics and bringing the total count to more than 60. 13 of these metrics are included at the free tier, and the remaining 21 metrics are included at the paid tier. With this launch, we not only introduced new metrics, but we also introduced a new concept for metrics, and these are the bucket properties metrics. These are metrics that are based on bucket-level configurations. So for example, you can now track the number of lifecycle configurations or replication rules per bucket, or some other specific bucket-level settings like versioning, multi-factor authentication, or KMS encryption that are enabled on your bucket. This is really useful when you want to audit your bucket-level configurations on all of your buckets across the organization. These new metrics enable a number of new use cases, including advanced cost optimization, advanced data protection, access management, detailed status code, performance, and events. Just to touch on a few examples, because we're going to go deeper in the second part of the session, for advanced use cases for cost optimization, you can now audit lifecycle rules usage to identify any discrepancies in your lifecycle's configurations across the organization. For advanced use cases for data protection, you can now easily identify buckets missing multi-factor authentication or versioning configuration to create a standardized view, to standardize your data protection configuration across all of your buckets. So this is a full list of the 34 new metrics that we recently added, categorized by the free tiers and the use case category. Yeah, I'm going to leave it up for a few more seconds, so if you're interested in taking photos. And before we go over to the use cases and the practical examples, I want to cover the pricing and the configuration for these new metrics in Lens. So as a recap, Storage Lens has a two-tier pricing model with a free tier that is auto-enabled for all customers and a paid tier that comes at a price of 20 cents per million objects monitored per month. Once you update from the free tier to the advanced tier, you get access to more capabilities in Lens, including more metrics, deeper granularity levels going down to the prefix level, longer historical ranges of collecting data, and the CloudWatch publishing option. I want to call out that with this release, we're not doing any changes to our pricing model, so everything stays the same. The metrics are spread across the two tiers, with 13 of them included with the free tier, and the remaining 21 included in the paid tier. So how do you enable the new metrics in Storage Lens? So all you have to do is to go into your dashboard configuration page and make sure that you opted in to the advanced metric selection. Then you can choose among the available categories, such as advanced cost optimization, advanced data protection, and detailed status codes. Once you enable them, the metrics will start to show up in your dashboard after 24 hours. OK, now with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sneha to go over use cases with the new metrics lens.
Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here to be sharing some tips and tricks about these new metrics that we've added in Storage Lens. Your goal is to protect your data and make your storage cost efficient, and Lens can actually help you get there. I'll talk about how you can combine these different metrics to answer some of the questions for your business needs. Pino showed you some of the existing questions that you can answer with the metrics that were there in Storage Lens. And these are some of the new questions that you can also now answer using Storage Lens. How many buckets are still allowing use of ACLs? How do I optimize my storage spend using lifecycle policies? Is my data protected from accidental deletes and overwrites? As you can see, these questions span over different categories like access management, cost optimization, and data protection. So for the rest of this talk, I'll go into these different categories of metrics. And for each category, I'll describe some of the problems that you may be running into and how you can leverage Storage Lens for it. My hope is that this is going to help you jumpstart your journey in exploring these new metrics. The first category of Lens metrics that I'm going to talk about today is access management. In S3, there are multiple ways to perform access management. The first is IAM, which is identity-based. IAM is always about who can access what in my account. The second is bucket policy, which is a resource-based policy. It's a common mode of access management that our customers use to grant access or deny it for other users and external accounts. And lastly, we have the access control list, which is the original method to control access to your S3 buckets and objects. ACLs are a legacy access mechanism that actually predate IAM policies and bucket policies. So we at S3 have been recommending our customers to migrate from ACLs to using policies to simplify their access management. And customers have also been asking us for insights into their usage of ACLs and for easy ways to move from them. So we at S3 did just that. We introduced object ownership, which is a bucket level setting that you can use to disable your use of ACLs. By default, when another account owner writes an object into your bucket, that account owner is the owner of the object. They also have access to it, and they can grant other users access to it using ACLs. And you can disable this default behavior by using object ownership. When you enable object ownership, specifically the bucket owner enforce setting, the use of ACLs get disabled. You, as the bucket owner, now own all the objects in your bucket. And so access management happens via policies such as IAM policies, S3 bucket policies, or the AWS organization service control policies. Additionally, only put requests with no ACLs or put requests with the bucket owner full control canned ACL will be accepted. So going back to our previous slide where we had the 3 different access control mechanisms, the idea for the object ownership feature is to take away your use of ACL and make your access control simple. So say you got tasked with finding how many buckets are still allowing use of ACLs in my account. Then you can jump to Lens, go to the Accounts view, and select the Access Management Metric category. Notice that most of the buckets in my account have the bucket owner enforce setting enabled, which means they are disallowing use of ACLs. I have some buckets which are using the bucket owner preferred setting. You can use this setting if you're trying to minimize your use of ACL, but want to ensure your workloads don't break. When you use this setting, if you are doing put requests for objects with the bucket owner full control canned ACL, then the objects will be owned by the bucket owner rather than the object writer. And the behavior for all other ACLs will remain in place. Lastly, I have some buckets which are still using the object writer mode, which means the object writer is the owner of the object and ACL usage is still being used over here. So this is the answer to our question. To find which are these buckets, you can use the buckets view. Here, the 1 indicates that the setting is enabled for the bucket, and the dash indicates that it's disabled for that bucket. So we looked at some ways in which you can use Storage Lens to simplify your access management. And now we'll move to the next category of metrics that were launched, detailed status code metrics. If you've been using S3 for a while, you may have wondered at some point if there were patterns for your requests succeeding or failing, and now there's a very easy way to find that out. What's causing my request to fail? If this question crosses your mind, then you can look at the detailed status code metrics in Storage Lens. Here from my accounts view, you'll see that most of the requests being received by the buckets in my account are actually succeeding. I do have some requests which are failing with the 400 bad request error. This error happens if there are expired tokens or invalid arguments being passed. But one other reason for this error to happen is because of ACLs. We talked about how you can disable ACLs using the object ownership feature. And when you do put requests with the bucket owner enforce setting turned on, you need to ensure that either no ACLs are being passed or only the bucket owner full control canned ACL is being passed. If you are sending put requests with other type of ACLs, then S3 will throw the 400 access control list not supported error. So you can now use Storage Lens to identify if you still have workflows that are sending puts with ACLs enabled. I also have some requests that are failing with the 403 forbidden error. This error happens if a user with insufficient permission is trying to access my objects. And this could happen if there's a misconfiguration in the application, or it could be because of some suspicious activity. To analyze further on the 403 forbidden error and to ensure that your permissions are configured correctly, you can use the top-end view. In my top-end buckets view, you can see the top 10 buckets that are receiving the maximum 403 forbidden error. You'll notice that there was a sudden spike for some of these buckets, which could point to a suspicious activity. So you can drill down further to find what these entities or events were using server access logs or the CloudTrail logs. To do a quick recap, we talked about how you can use the detailed status code metrics to understand patterns of failure. And now, we'll talk about my favorite category, which is cost optimization. Right from our houses to the big businesses, we're always trying to save on spending. And you can use Lens to optimize your costs. When we commonly think about cost optimization, lifecycle policies come to our mind. It's an effective way to save on costs as it allows you to manage the storage lifecycle of your object. Lifecycle policies comprise of 2 types of action. The first is a transition action. You can use this action to define when the objects should transition to the other storage classes. In my example over here, I have set up a lifecycle policy on my bucket with a transition lifecycle rule to move these objects to the Glacier Flexible Retrieval Storage class after 30 days of their creation. The second type of action is an expiration action, and you can use this action to define when the objects should be expired. expired objects will be deleted by S3 on your behalf. So in my example, I have set up an expiration lifecycle rule to delete the objects after 365 days of their creation. If you are assigned to find opportunities to save on costs, the first question that will cross your mind is, which buckets are missing lifecycle configuration? And here's how you can find out. You can use the buckets view, and under the cost optimization category, you'll find the lifecycle rule count metrics. In my example, most of the buckets have a standard of 2 transition lifecycle rule and 2 expiration lifecycle rules set up. But this bucket over here is actually deviating from this standard that's applicable to the other buckets in my account. So you can now use Lens to find if you have such buckets which are deviating from the standard lifecycle rule counts, perhaps mandated by your organization. I also have a bucket here which has entirely missed application of a lifecycle configuration. And this is causing me to miss out on cost savings. Once you find out that you have buckets which are missing lifecycle configuration, the next question that you'll ask is, how do I find the right lifecycle policy to apply? And you can use Storage Lens for this. Lens allows you to check if you have buckets that aren't being accessed frequently and are eligible to move to the colder storage tiers like the Glacier Deep Archive or the Glacier Flexible Retrieval. In my example, the bucket on the right corner here if you see, it has a very low retrieval rate, near 0 almost, and it has a large average object size. So this bucket is a perfect candidate to archive as long as I know that I don't need immediate access on a frequent basis. The bucket on the left corner over here, on the other hand, is being accessed very frequently. If the access pattern for these type of buckets are indeterministic, then you can use the S3 Intelligent Tiering Storage class. S3 Intelligent Tiering Storage class is designed to optimize on costs because it moves your object to the most cost-effective tier when your access patterns change. So as you can see, Lens now not only allows you to analyze your storage to help you find the right lifecycle policies, but it also allows you to ensure that these policies are in place for all the buckets in your organization or account. I'll talk about one other use case that Lens can help you solve. Multipart uploads were actually one of the first aha moments for me when I started to learn to use S3 the right way. It's a smart feature where you can upload a single object as parts, and this provides you benefits such as improved throughput and quick recovery from network issues. Usually, when your objects are greater than 100 megabytes, we recommend using the Multipart upload feature. It's a 3-step process, the first step being you initiate the upload, the second is where you upload the parts, and the third step is where S3 will construct the object by assembling these parts. But what happens if a Multipart upload request doesn't complete successfully? If the Multipart upload request isn't sent successfully, then S3 will not be able to assemble the parts and construct the object. So these parts will continue to remain in your bucket until the request completes, or you apply an abort incomplete MPU lifecycle rule policy to clean these parts up. And you'll be continued to be charged at the storage class that was used when the parts were being uploaded. To figure out if you are overspending on incomplete MPUs, you can look at the incomplete MPU storage bytes metric under the cost optimization category. If you'll see, I have a bucket here which has 93 GB of incomplete MPU bytes. And when you correlate it with the abort incomplete MPU lifecycle rule count metric, you'll notice that I'm missing it, which is causing me to overspend on my MPUs. We recommend you to use 7 days after creation date to abort your incomplete MPUs, which is why we've also added an additional metric to indicate how many of your bytes are older than 7 days. To summarize, we looked at some ways in which you can find ways to save on costs using Storage Lens. And now, we'll move to the last category of metric that I'll talk about today. The other day, I read a joke in an online comic where 2 folks were discussing data protection and cloud security, and then one of them goes, "I'm not worried about my cloud security at all. My data is just so disorganized, no one is going to be able to find anything." Disorganized or otherwise, protecting your data is still very important, which is why I saved the best category for the last. I'll talk about the different features in S3 that you can use to protect your data and how you can audit for them using Storage Lens. I'll be talking about the versioning and multi-factor authentication delete auditing, replication auditing, and encryption auditing. First up is versioning and MFA delete auditing. Customers are always trying to protect their data from accidental deletes and overwrites. And versioning is how you would achieve this in S3. Versioning is a way for you to keep multiple variants of an object in the same bucket. And so you can preserve, retrieve, and restore to any version of any object. This allows you to recover from unintended user actions as well as application failures. The figure illustrates how versioning protects your data. As you can see, every overwrite is causing a new version to be written. If you delete an object without specifying the version ID, then S3 will insert a delete marker, which will start acting as the current version of the object. You can think of delete markers as tombstones that sit on top of the latest version of your object, so you can always restore to the previous version. When using versioning on your buckets, you can enable an additional layer of security by configuring your buckets to enable the multi-factor authentication deletes. Say your security credentials got compromised. You may think that, well, I have versioning enabled, so I should be able to restore any object that got deleted. But what if all the versions were deleted as well? Then MFA delete can help you here, as it prevents accidental bucket deletions. It requires the user who initiates the delete action to show physical possession of an MFA device with an MFA token. So it's adding an additional layer of, it's adding some friction to your delete action, and it's providing you the security. If you are looking to protect your data from accidental deletes and overwrites, then you can select the data protection metric category. From the accounts view, you can see that 84% of the buckets in my account have versioning enabled. And nearly 20% also have the MFA delete enabled. You can jump to the buckets view to see which buckets have this feature enabled. For example, the bucket over here has both of the settings enabled, while this bucket has neither of them enabled. If you wish to enable versioning at this point, it's still just a one-click action on the console, and you can start protecting your data going forward. Okay, now that you've applied versioning, you have added the guardrails to protect your data. But over a period of time, it may happen that you end up with more versions than you need. Non-current version lifecycle policies are your friends here, as they will help you restrict the number of versions. Lens can help you find if you have buckets with high number of non-current version bytes, but are missing the non-current version lifecycle rule to transition or expire them. In my example, I have a bucket which has nearly 900 GB of non-current version bytes, which is amounting to 95% of the total bytes and object count in that bucket. And when you correlate it with the non-current version lifecycle transition and expiration rule count metric, you'll see that I'm missing both of them, and this is causing me to forego on cost savings. Similarly, you can also view the bytes that are occupied by the delete markers and tally it with the expired object delete marker lifecycle rule count to ensure that your delete markers are also being cleaned up. An expired object delete marker is one where all the versions were deleted and only the delete marker remains. Lifecycle will help you remove such delete markers and save on cost. Next, replication auditing. Replication is an elastic, fully managed, low-cost feature that allows you to replicate your objects between the buckets. It offers you a rich set of features that you can use to configure where and how to replicate. To get started, you set up a replication rule where you specify the source bucket and the destination bucket. And once the rule is set up, S3 will automatically replicate the object and its metadata from the source bucket. Replication offers multiple options for where you want to replicate. Either you can replicate to a destination bucket in the same region, or the destination bucket could be in a different region. You can replicate from one source bucket to multiple destination buckets if that's what your use case needs. And you can also replicate to a destination bucket which is in a different account. You can use Storage Lens to audit your usage of replication in your account. For example, the first 3 buckets in my account are replicating to a destination bucket which is in the same region and in the same account. This bucket, on the other hand, is replicating to a destination bucket which is in a different region but still within the same account. This bucket, on the other hand, is actually replicating to a destination bucket which is in a different region as well as a different account. Occasionally, it may happen that after you set up the replication rule, the destination bucket got deleted. This often happens to me at home. I'm thinking here that my stash of chocolates is safe, but when I go to check on it, it's all empty, thanks to my kid. But at least I don't need to worry about this at work. Storage Lens has added the invalid destination replication rule count metric that you can use to verify that all the buckets have a valid destination bucket, and you can take the corrective actions to ensure that your data continues being replicated. Sometimes your replication workflow may fail, likely due to permission errors, but this may go unnoticed if you don't have replication events set up. You can use the replicated byte source and the replicated object count source metric to find that if there are objects that are not being replicated. In my example, I have 2 buckets where only 80% of the bytes have been replicated. To find what these objects are, you can enable S3 inventory. S3 inventory has a replication status field that you can use to discover the objects that have either failed or are still pending replication. So we learned a few possible ways to use Storage Lens to audit your replication usage. And on to the last data protection feature that we will discuss today, which is encryption. Encryption can be done at different stages. You can either encrypt the object on the client side before you send your data to S3. You can use the AWS encryption SDK, or you can use any application of your choice. Then, your data is encrypted in transit. And lastly, you can opt in to encrypt your data when at rest in S3. There are 3 modes of encryption that we offer. The first is SSE S3, which is the most common mode of encryption that our customers use because it's hands-free, hands-off, and you also get the encryption at rest you need for free. The other type of encryption that we offer is SSE KMS, which uses the AWS Key Management Service. The advantage of this mode is that you get visibility via CloudTrail logs. There are 2 further options in this mode. The first is where S3 manages the KMS key, and the second is where the customer has to manage the KMS key. In the latter option, you have to manage the rotation of the key as well as the policies associated with the key. But if sharing data across accounts is a use case for you, then you will have to use this option. And lastly, there is SSE-C, where customer gives us the encryption key and S3 does the encryption. With Storage Lens, you can quickly pinpoint which buckets have unencrypted data. Here, the encrypted bytes include any type of SSE encryption that you may have enabled on the bucket. For example, you will notice that I have a bucket which has 1.5 terabytes of unencrypted bytes, impacting all the objects in the bucket. With Lens, we've also added metrics for SSE KMS. You can assess whether the required buckets in your account have the SSE KMS enabled. You can also check how many SSE KMS requests are being received by the buckets in your account. Relating these metrics together actually can allow you to discern discrepancies. For example, I have a bucket here which has encrypted bytes, and you'll see that it's also receiving KMS requests. But when you check the SSE KMS enabled bucket count metric, it's showing up as disabled, which means that at some point this setting got turned off. So all the new objects that were written were unencrypted. So I just want to hone in that the power is now in your hands. It's going to be a useful exercise for you to take a look at these metrics and understand their impacts in your business. Wrapping up the session now, to rehash, we looked at the different tools in S3 that you can use to gain insights into your storage. We talked about S3 inventory, storage class analysis, server access log, metrics to CloudWatch, and storage lens. We recommend a storage lens as your first stop into your journey of exploring your storage. It has the broadest view across your entire organization and your accounts, and it also offers a wide array of metrics for you to use. Pino talked to you about our newest edition of metrics in Storage Lens, which is bringing the total count of metrics to be greater than 60. We also went over some of the use cases that you can address with Storage Lens and how you can ensure that your data is being protected and you are being cost efficient. And I can't stress enough, the pricing remains the same. So you're getting 13 new metrics in the free tier and 21 new metrics in the advanced tier. Thank you all. That's all for our session today. We'll be hanging around, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. There should be a link to a session survey in your inbox, so please provide us feedback on our session here today. Have a great day, and happy reinventing.